Hey guys, welcome to a new episode of The Daily Friend, proudly brought to you by the Institute of Race Relations, supported of course by the Big Liberty Show. I have an awesome panel with me this morning, and we're going to have a chat around some of the pieces we've written in the past. Guys, remember, if you want to support the Institute of Race Relations and shows like The Daily Friend and the Big Liberty Show, you can do that by SMSing your name to 32823, or hey, find us online at irr.org.za /join. Terms and conditions do apply. Guys, welcome to today's show. Let me just quickly welcome everybody on the panel. Terence, good morning to you.
Hello.
Sarah, good morning. And Marius, hello. Good to see you. Guys, interesting week we've had, and interesting week maybe looking forward. But let's talk about some of the interesting pieces that came out yesterday and really over the weekend. A piece by John Kane Berman. It's books first and then people, or is it vice versa? The idea leading off Tony Ngeni's tweet, actually, where he essentially threatens the mayor of Johannesburg, Herman Mashaba, with necklacing, indirectly, of course, as most politicians are very careful around their language these days. Guys, we've seen this sort of practice in the past. Is this something we should be even stoking as part of the political rhetoric in this country?
No, I think this is deeply sinister. The necklace has a particular place in South African iconography. It represented a means of execution that was particularly brutal and particularly painful, and was meant as a form of intimidation. The ANC itself was always rather ambivalent about where it stood. On the one hand, it said that it wasn't going to condemn it because this was the righteous anger of the people. On the other hand, it ended up creating a very severe reputational problem, particularly in the Western democracies. Now, I think that for me, what sends a cold shiver is that this is now 25 years into a democracy. If there ever was an argument you could make for that sort of politics, that's long gone. To speak about the duly elected mayor of one of the largest cities in the country in these terms, it brings us back to the sort of worst, most debased forms of our politics, and I really think that there is no plausible argument that you can make that is okay.
Well, you might have someone like Tony Ngeni push back and say, well, I have a freedom of speech, don't I? And that was me just exercising my freedom of speech. Guys, is there a reasonable line or a distinction to be drawn around what becomes freedom of speech and when something becomes essentially an incitement to violence?
Well, arguably this is an incitement to violence, but it was couched a little obliquely, but you could certainly get the meaning from it. If I can just pick up on what Terence was alluding to, there were other aspects of necklacing that were particularly problematic, shall I say. The one is that it was a form of punishment that it was a death sentence without a trial.
Yep.
So the facts were not relevant, and it was a public display.
Absolutely.
It was not just meant to intimidate, as Terence said, but it had echoes of,
a lugubrious
medieval
display,
times.
really,
Yeah.
of false justice in many cases, because, as you said, there was no trial, there was no rule of law. Essentially, you could have people decide, maybe if they had a grudge on you, that you're an mpimpi, the common word that was used back then, and essentially, and funny enough, and this is the really scary part, because there are people online, for instance, who will use this terminology on me, trying to be trolls, but elicit these sort of images, essentially to try and scare me from expressing free ideas.
Somebody called you an Ascari on Twitter.
Exactly.
I mean, that's a terrible thing to call somebody.
Yeah.
And it's up there with the Uncle Toms and calling people.
Exactly.
Look, I'll go one step further. This is often forgotten, but in the 1990s there was an official commission of inquiry into witch purging in what's now Limpopo, under Professor Rollo Shai, and they actually made the point that there's a very, very direct line you can draw between taking out people who have been identified as impimpis now and people who you want to associate with witchcraft or or some sort of supernatural disturbance, and the way in which they're being taken out is very, very similar. Both with fire, there's a certain ritual significance to that.
But I think what this also shows is how schizophrenic the ANC is, because in some ways the ANC is your normal bog standard social democratic party, leans a bit left, whatever, and in some ways still a liberation movement that hasn't moved on to normal electoral politics.
That's
where
right.
This kind of rhetoric's kind of accepted. And I think when you're talking about the freedom of speech issue, Sarah's right. Tony Ngeni didn't obviously directly threaten Mayor Mashaba, but as we all know with free speech, just because you can say something doesn't mean you have to say something. Same with the old South African flag. I mean, we're not opposed to banning it, but you certainly shouldn't. You should be allowed to display it, but you should also think about when you do display it, what kind of. I mean, it does. It's a very emotional thing, the flag, and it does create. It's for many people, it is a symbol of oppression.
I mean,
think, why would you? Just because you can display it, for
absolutely.
example, why do you need to?
And equally, free speech means, you can say whatever you want, but also you have to be responsible for what you say and the criticism that comes from that. And I think Tony was rightfully slated by people online, including by people that he assumed would support his position on this. Guys, let's quickly move on. Terence, you wrote a fantastic piece, A Farm Under Siege. Tell us more about that.
Okay, this is an unfolding story about a farm in the Natal Midlands. A big enterprise, sawmill, dairy, plantation, pays 2 million rands worth of wages every month. I mean, this is if we are going to have a rural economy, this is the kind of thing we need. And it's an interesting story. It's not a farm invasion. It's not a farm attack. It's not a land reform story. Essentially, a group of disgruntled former workers and community activists essentially laid siege to this property. The issue being the fact that that the farmer employed of a 350 odd workforce 6 Zimbabweans, and it escalated very very rapidly. People were prevented from coming and going, and hence the word siege is used advisedly. Cattle were being mutilated. No one appears to have been killed. But the really disturbing thing is that an interdict was granted by the courts for the protesters to cease and desist intimidating or threatening the property. Right. When the sheriff of the court went to the local police to ask for their protection to go and serve it, they simply said that they don't have the resources. And
that's a massive problem, Terence, because
absolutely.
It speaks to, and I want to, prod in this one. It's a massive problem because it speaks to the absolute failure of the state to protect people's property rights, and in this case, 350 people's livelihoods are dependent on this business. Yeah. Is the state doing enough to protect property rights in this instance?
No. Well, this is something that actually is emblematic of a much bigger problem in rural South Africa. There are any number of complaints made about police performance, but I think for those of us in the cities, the situation is to some extent bearable. Rural police forces have to cover much larger areas. They have to deal with crimes that often require crime intelligence. Yeah. And it's something I've heard again and again and again from farmers or people who work with rural folk, that essentially the state's writ does not run, and this is something that affects commercial farmers, emerging farmers, traditional communities, and I think in the case of traditional communities, what you see there is this kind of outsourcing to traditional leaders,
right?
Hence the traditional courts,
right.
But all of this means that that the protection that South African citizens are entitled to in terms of the constitutional law from their state is simply not afforded to them, and this should concern us all.
Morris, we're not looking after our farmers in this country, and generally speaking, I mean, you wrote a great report earlier on, late last year, the Broken Blue Line. Yeah. Top 3 solutions that you'd argue maybe in this space that we could do to protect our farmers and just broadly protect communities?
Well, I think one, especially when we're talking about farmers, police and communities have to work together.
That's right.
That's a very important one. There's got to be, people need to be able to trust their police and not see them as a sort of even an occupation force.
Yeah.
And I think also we need to let people be able to protect themselves and their property. So we've suggested that people can get tax rebates for when they
security upgrades,
their homes and so on. So I think there's a couple of things we can do, but I think one of the most important ones is for farmers and and the police to work together.
Absolutely.
For this kind of thing.
Guys, thank you very much. Of course, you can find the writings of my colleagues here on the Daily Friend, which is our online publication of all the works that we do here. Hard analysis, great data, and actually topical stuff that's happening in the country right now. And you can find that on www.dailyfriend.co.za. And guys, as I said, you can support our work by becoming a friend of the IRR. Find us again via SMS at 32823. Terms and conditions do apply. An SMS will cost you R1. Guys, I'm Big Daddy Liberty. Thank you so much for having joined us. We'll see you in the next episode.